you. And thank you for joining us today. Our service will now begin.
Makes you want to just go whoosh. Let's all do it. Whoosh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Deborah Bennett, and it is a delight to be with you here this morning and to share worship time. I do hold this as such a sacred time each week, and thank you for coming, for each other here in this room, and for yourselves to take this moment of pause and time to reflect on our topic of the day. And although this morning's topic is not a light one, it does feel important to include it each year in our yearly worship reflection calendar. It is this time of year when the leaves begin to fall and parts of nature make their death transitions, that many spiritual traditions take time to acknowledge those that have died, or as some of us like to say, those that have made their transition. This is the time when some traditions contend that the veil between those that are living and those that have died is the thinnest. As some believe that this is the time of year that perhaps we can make a connection with them from across that veil, and they with us. So we've begun to create a beautiful altar. Some people have put some photos on our altar this morning, and later in the service I'm going to invite you into a ritual of remembrance. You might have noticed at the end of the pews there's some index cards, and we'll use those later to write names on them for our ritual. So I'm going to begin, though, this morning with this poem from my colleague, Reverend Heather Janulis. She's the minister in Winchester. It's called This Sacred Thread. They once dwelled among us, the people of memory, they who knew us, they who taught us, they who hurt us, they who loved us. They touch our lives time and again through their presence and their absence, through familiar scents and favorite songs, through old stories and renewed sorrow. As the earth turns and leaves fall, we reach back to renew the bonds between us. With hearts and hands open, we hold onto love, even stronger than death. We reach back in gratitude and understanding. Without our time together, the pain and the joy, we would never be who we are today. We would have little to pass on ourselves. Without fear, with thanksgiving, and with hope for all that awaits, we remember those who have gone before. We honor the circle of life and death and our place within its sacred thread. So let us light our chalice now as a symbol of the sacred thread that we hold together as Unitarian Universalists. Jim and Suzanne Tabiri will light our chalice.
Please join us in saying atonement, which is this is the word of service. With open minds and loving hearts, we gather to search for meaning, to care for one another, and to work together for a better world.
Thank you. Let's rise and body our spirit as you are able for our opening hymn. It is 1051, that is in the teal hymnal. It's a beautiful hymn called We Are. Please rise as you are able.
beautiful, thank you. So, okay, I'm going to lean down and talk in. So I am Kate Holland. I am the Director of Lifespan Education here at First Parish. I use the pronouns she, her, and I'm just going to start by saying I'm cheating today, and I'm really sorry. So I have two things to say before I start my story. First is that we were supposed to apple pick today, and I don't think the weather's going to cooperate with us. If you want to check in with me at like 11:15, we can maybe roll the dice, but I think it's not going to cooperate. And the second thing I wanted to let people know, last Meaning Matters, we had people come and grab cameras and go through the First Parish and take photos. So all of those wonderful photos are playing on the TV down in the vestry. So please take a moment while you're sipping your coffee and chatting to your friends to take a look, because they did a fabulous, fabulous job. Okay, now on to the story. That's the part you were waiting for, right? So my story today is about a little girl, Sarah, and Sarah was really sad when she lost her balloon, but it wasn't anything compared to when Sarah lost her grandmother. It made her so sad. She could have another balloon, but she'd never have another grandma. And so her mom, after a while, came to her and said, I can see how sad you are and how much you miss your grandmother. And I feel it too, but I have an idea for both of us. Let's make a memory box. So she took out 2 boxes. They sat at the table and they decorated it. So they put all the colors on and paper that they liked. And then she said, let me explain, Sarah, what this is for. So when we miss Grandma, we're going to put something in the box that reminds us of her. So they thought this was a great idea. So luckily, they had a Polaroid camera. And in the house, there was a beautiful comforter that she always put over her legs when she was at their house. So they took a picture of it, and they put the picture in the memory box. So the other day, they went and they made cookies, and it was Grandma's recipe, and they were fabulous. And so she wrote down very carefully the recipe, and she put it into her memory box. During the summer, they went to the beach that they went to with Grandma, and so she spent all day on the beach looking for the perfect shell, just like she and her grandma would. And when she found it, she took it and she put it in her memory box. After a while, the memories were really full, but she realized there were things that were happening in her life that she would want to share with her grandma. So when she graduated from high school, she took her high school photo and put it in the box because she wanted to share that memory. And when she had her first baby, she took pictures of that baby and put it in the box because she wanted to share that memory with her. It is hard to lose somebody that we love, but they're memories, and we can think of them in those big moments of our lives and share that piece of them and hold them very close. So, thank you for listening to my story. And I'm going to invite our friends, they're going to go to Seek, to come down with us. And I invite all of you to use your big voices and sing us on out. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I got a little teary with that story. We are indeed a community of heritage and a community of hope for the future. As the spiritual ancestors of First Parish worked hard to keep this place alive and growing to allow you to be here, you are now asked to do what you can do to ensure that this spiritual home is available for the generations to come. As the offering is received today, I invite you to think of those yet unborn who may one day sit in the very seats you are in, and be grateful for your commitment to First Parish. For those who prefer to give online or via text, there are cards in the pews that tell you how to do that. And for those that wish to make a donation at this time, the offering will now be received. If this is your first time with us this morning, please allow the plate to pass you by as you are our guest.
Good morning. Crouch. Is it easy to raise up? Hold, please. Oh, thank you. Good thing you're sitting here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julia Kenny. I'm one of the lay ministers of this congregation. My pronouns are she, hers. This is a time in our service that we set aside to acknowledge the joys and sorrows that we all hold. In both our sharing and in our witness, we affirm our covenant to care for one another. If you'd like to share a personal joy or sorrow, please feel free to come forward or raise your hand and I can bring the microphone to you. If you're online, you can type in a joy or sorrow in the chat and I'm happy to share it. Deborah's going to light our candles today. Heart too tender to share at this time. As Deborah lights a candle on behalf of those joys and sorrows, let us hold each other in a moment of silence. Blessed be.
Good morning. I'm Matthew Shear. I've been asked to do this morning's reading. This is not a traditional Buddhist story, as appears in your order of service, but rather a piece called The Invisible Entrance, by the Irish poet and Celtic theologian John O'Donoghue from his 2004 book, Beauty. The dead are not distant or absent. They are alongside us. When we lose someone to death, we lose their physical image and presence. They slip out of visible form and into invisible presence. This alteration of form is the reason we cannot see the dead. But because we cannot see them, does not mean that they are not there. Transfigured into eternal form, the dead cannot reverse the journey and even for 1 second re-enter their old form to linger with us for a while. Though they cannot reappear, they continue to be near us, and part of the healing of grief is the refinement of our hearts, whereby we come to sense their loving nearness. When we ourselves enter the eternal world and come to see our lives on earth in full view, we may be surprised with which our departed loved ones have accompanied every moment of our lives. In their new transfigured presence, their compassion, understanding, and love take on a divine depth, enabling them to become secret angels, guiding and sheltering the unfolding of our destiny.
Thank you, Matthew. I know it's been 2 straight weeks of John O'Donoghue, but I love his writing on death and the veil, so you're going to have to excuse my indulgence here. I will put him away eventually. For me, his image of how we pass from a visible to an invisible presence touches me. Our invocation this morning also offered us a beautiful image of those that have passed being everywhere around us, in the rustling of the leaves, in the wailing child, in our homes and in the crowd. These are not unique ideas, of course. There are a plethora of poems and texts that suggest that death is, as O'Donoghue puts it, a transfiguring, a transformation from one form to another. Now, I realize where I'm at, that I am in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, and as such, we do not all hold the same beliefs about such things as death. Is that a correct assumption? How many people had to take a breath during John O'Donoghue's reading and be like, I don't know. Oh, more people than I thought. Well, hang in there. It's only 15 minutes, then you'll get to your coffee. It's all going to be okay. I imagine some of you may think poems and texts about the life experience, about life beyond the experience of death, are at best simply beautiful metaphors. And at worst, perhaps they are distracting, perhaps dangerous, and surely unprovable fantasies. But I also imagine that some of you, like me, may find the ideas of an eternal soul or a presence not only comforting, but that they awaken in you some ancient tickle of a memory. Whatever the case for you, perhaps there is one thing in which we all in this room can agree, and that is when a loved one dies, it is heartbreaking. Yes? And bewildering. I mean, one moment, there's this person, they're breathing, they're living, they're right there with us, and then the next moment, all that just stops, and they are somehow gone. At 5:35, they were alive, but at 5:36, they were not. And so often when death occurs, isn't it strange how the body just still is laying there? But where did they go? Think about that for a moment. If I want to find you, I find your body, right? It's a pretty reliable location of you. If I'm looking for Polly, I can't go up to Kate and expect to see Polly. We all accept that truth. But then the time comes when the body, it's still sitting there, well, laying there. The body's still there, but the person is not there. And no matter how many people I've sat with at death, I still find that bewildering and fascinating. And the hard part about that is because there's nothing we can do about it in that moment, can we? Even O'Donohue concedes that the dead cannot reverse the journey, and even for 1 second re-enter their old form to linger with us a while. But that doesn't mean that all is lost. For although charlatan mediums have preyed on people's understandable desire to make contact with the dead, there are also many well-documented cases of times when that veil does seem to become just thin enough for an invisible presence to make itself known. Deathbed visions is what they're called, and they've been well documented for literally hundreds of years. Over the centuries, thousands of nurses and doctors, hospice care people, and people who are sitting with the dying in their last days and in their last hours have reported that they have experienced some sort of vision or are being visited by someone they know that had previously died. And almost universally, these visions create a sense of calm and peace in the person who is dying. Researcher and psychologist Dr. Marilyn Mendoza, who studies death, recounts many such stories in her book. Her book is called We Do Not Die Alone, but the best part about her book is the subtitle, Jesus is Coming to Get Me in a White Pickup Truck. I don't have a particular affinity for Jesus or pickup trucks, but something about that image makes me want to like them more. In the book, Mendoza recounts the stories of many nurses and hospice workers who have been with the dying. Stories such as the one of a 52-year-old woman dying after a failed transplant. And the nurse says she was terrified of dying and often spoke about how she was never going to give in to death. But 2 days before her death, she kept looking over my shoulder and laughing and smiling at someone standing behind me. But there was no one there. I asked the patient who she was talking to, and she told me her dead father. And then she just said out loud, "Okay, all right, it's okay. I'm not afraid." And indeed, she was no longer afraid. And there's this great story about an elderly woman who had been in hospice when her son had died. And because of her own tender condition, the family had decided to not tell her about her son's death. Her sister shares the story of how she went to visit her one day and found the woman was all dressed up very nicely as if she was going somewhere. And when the sister asked why she was dressed so nicely, the woman replied that her son had stopped by and said that he would be back to take her with him. And the woman died the next day. The number of similar stories is staggering. And of course, some people will say that they prove nothing, except perhaps that part of the memory centers in the brain are activated near death. But in my case, I was not the dying person when I had a deathbed experience. On March 24th of last year, less than 48 hours after he was admitted to the hospital, my mother and I sat on either side of my father's hospital bed. It was early in the morning. Dad was experiencing multiple organ failures and had quickly gone from a stage where he was able to talk freely with us to a stage where he was speechless and breathing with great difficulty. As my mom and I sat holding his hands, a strong feeling came over me. You know how you can be facing in one direction and you can feel when someone walks into the room behind you? It was like that. All of a sudden, I couldn't see him, but I could feel my brother standing in the room. Now, standing may not be the correct word because my brother had died 5 years before, so obviously he was not physically standing in the room. But it felt like he had literally pulled back that veil between death and life for a moment and just stepped through it. Immediately after I felt Jim's strong presence, Dad's eyes moved directly to where I felt my brother had been standing. "Jim is here, isn't he?" I questioned my father, already knowing the answer. And my very staunch atheist father shook his head ever so slightly. "It's okay, he's got you," I reassured him. "And now you know," I added because I just couldn't help myself. Dad's demeanor changed. Where before his eyes had been full of struggle and fear, now he looked peaceful and strangely intentional about what he was going to experience. And then literally a few short minutes later, with one last breath from Dad, the two were gone. And I mean gone. Like, they didn't linger very long. Their presence simply vanished. They obviously had something better to do than to hang around a hospital bed. I think back to that day often and I wonder, was it just my imagination? Some state brought on by, in my mind, due to shock or some preconceived ideas I had about death? Or was it possible that there was a veil between life and death? And was it possible that in that moment the veil got thin, so thin that I could feel my brother's invisible presence as he reached across to Dad's hand? And I wonder often what Dad's experience really was that day. He did not believe in such things, and yet it sure seemed like he saw something, and that something brought him comfort. Of course, maybe it's just a matter of interpretation and perception. Interestingly, my dad was adamant that his own hospital near-death experience several years earlier was in fact proof that there was nothing after death. One day, Dad called me and started asking me about books on near-death experiences, a topic that he had become very interested in since his heart attack. During the conversation, he started telling me about his experience of being, quote, dead for 8 minutes during his cardiac arrest. He says his experience was proof that there is no afterlife, as he did not see a tunnel, there were no lights, there were no angels or any other such nonsense, in his words, had appeared to him. Instead, he recounted that everything during that death experience for him was black. Just total blackness, he said, and he repeated that several times. And then he paused for a moment and he added, "But it was very peaceful, really peaceful." He kept saying that. He said it was the greatest peace I had ever known. And he said this part with great conviction and calm, and for him it was settled. Death just equaled black peace. And I let him have this moment, and then I gently asked him, "So, Dad, who was it that was experiencing the peace? Who was aware that it was black?" And there was silence on the phone as I allowed him to ponder that ancient Vedic question. And then he changed subjects. Indeed, perhaps it's just a matter of perception and definition and experience. For Dad, he was comfortable with death being seen as black peace. For me, his awareness of black, his awareness of the experience of peace, that's the intriguing part for me about death. I realize that we all hold different beliefs and have had different experiences and may have different interpretations of deathbed visions or perceptions about spiritual connections between the living and the dead. And I think that's okay too. And so, especially for those who would like to hear a different interpretation of how life continues after death, I'm going to offer this little story from Franz Kafka. At 40, the novelist and famed early 20th century writer Franz Kafka, who never married and had no children, walked through the park in Berlin when he met a little girl who was crying because she had lost her favorite doll. And she and Kafka searched for the doll unsuccessfully. He told her to meet him in the park the next day, and they would go back to looking for the doll. The next day, when they had not yet found the doll, Kafka gave the girl a letter written by the doll. It said, "Please don't cry. I took a trip to see the world. I will write you all about my adventures." And thus began a story of letters which continued until near the end of his life. During their meetings, Kafka would read the letters of the doll carefully written with all descriptions of the adventures and the conversations she had had around the world, and the girl found it very comforting. And finally, one day, Kafka presented the girl with a doll, who obviously did not look exactly the same as the original, which at first caused the little girl great distress. But then Kafka handed her another letter in which the doll wrote, "My travels have changed me." She liked that answer. The next year, Kafka died. And many years later, the now adult girl found a tiny letter stuffed inside this much cherished doll. In the tiny letter, signed by Kafka, it was written, "Everything you love will be lost, but in the end, love will return in a different form." So whether you have experienced your loved one connecting with you from beyond the veil through words or a feeling sense, through the rustle of nature, or through connections that come passed down from one person to the next, I hope you find comfort in knowing that in some way there is indeed a connection across the veil from life to death. Today we created our altar and placed on it the photos and mementos. A few of you have done that. For those that did not get the chance to do that, we're going to move into a little ritual that I'm going to invite you into. In the pews, there are index cards. They were at the very end of each. And near the hymnals, there are pencils. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you, and you can begin this now if you'd like, to write the names of someone that you love who has passed on the card. And in a moment, I'm going to invite you to bring those forward. Polly will play us some nice music. Give me a moment here to set up. And if you would prefer not to bring them forward, but when someone else too, I can come and get them. And we're just going to have a nice little ritual here that I'm going to invite you into as a way of remembrance, a way to pause, and just remember. Not only remember in words, but remember in the felt sense. Can we feel the presence of those that have gone before? So whether you've brought a photo up or not, I'll invite you to come up. I have our singing bowl. So I'm going to invite you to come up. You can place the card with the name on it. Go ahead and give a little sound for your loved one. And then if you'd like to come to the mic, you can just say their names. And that way we can all be bathed in the names of those that we are remembering this morning. Okay? Polly, if you'll give us a little music. I invite the choir to also participate. Please come down. We'll have the anthem later, so come down early. My card is up here, so I will start with my card. Can't find my card. Well, I'm going to virtually put my card in, and I am going to say the name of my father, Larry, my brother, Jim, and two dear friends that died within the last 2 weeks, Mark Horn and Don Stapleton. I'll ring the bell for each of them. Please come forward. If you'd like me to come get your card, just raise your hand and I will come. You can make a line on either side.
Jean Pratt.
Margaret Green.
Wendy Barber.
John Gould.
Ken Sawyer.
Sadie Comfort White. Sadie White Comfort, my maternal grandmother.
Glenn Leeson.
John and Winifred Dewey.
Bill Breer.
Barbara and William Horine.
Ruthie.
Beloved cousins Roger Tiberi and Bruce Giovanello.
Anna McMahon, my grandmother.
William Godfrey, James Forster, Francis Forster.
Richard and Virginia Sims.
My husband and my two best friends' husbands, Paul, Clive, and Andrew.
My friend Brian O'Donovan.
My sister Mary and her husband Jack.
My grandmothers, Ruth Richardson Pease and Naomi Windsor Cooper, and our dear friend Stephen Winthrop.
Susan Elioff and Barbara Olmsted.
Dunn Astley, my parents, Mason Royden Astley, Edna Astley.
My brother Bob.
My parents, Kate and Dick, and dear friend Norma.
My sister Susie of 84 years.
Let's take a moment as we hold the sacred bowl of memory. I invite you into a moment of prayer. If you like to close your eyes, if that's comfortable for you, feel free to do that. As we hold the spirit of life and the spirit of love, God of many names, whatever it is in this great mystery that connects us across the veil of time, may our love continue on. May saying of these names help comfort us and connect us, both to those who we named and to each other, knowing that we all share the experience of life and death. So may it be, and amen. Thank you, choir. That was beautiful. We indeed will remember them. I invite you to take them with you today and to feel their presence here. Just had a flash of just feeling like the whole space just filled, imagining those that you named sitting with you today, here and now. So whether that is just a nice thought or something that you can viscerally feel, I invite you to take that moment and enjoy the presence of your loved ones. Let us extinguish our chalice together this morning. The words are in the order of service if you'd like to follow along. We extinguish this light, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. Shall we sing? Please rise in body or spirit. We're going to sing hymn 336, All My Memories of Love. Please rise as you're able. We all remember that those we have known and loved are inextricably woven into our lives. Like tributaries merging onto a river, streams winding their way down a mountain, and underground springs which though unseen, cleanse and renew the waters. May we each go forward this week holding this mystery just a little lighter than perhaps we held it before. Go now in peace and take peace wherever you go. Thank you for joining us this morning and bringing your loved ones.